in the cool of the evening when everything is getting kind of groovy. I call you up and ask you if you'd like to go with me and see a movie. First you say no, you've got some plans for the night, and then you stop and say, alright, love is kinda crazy with a spooky little boy like you. Spooky, you always keep me guessing, I never seem to know what you are thinking. And if some girl looks at you, it's for sure your little eye will be a winking. I get confused cause I don't know where I stand, and then you smile and hold my hand. Love is kinda crazy with a spooky little boy like you. Spooky, ooh yeah. You always keep me guessing, I never seem to know what you are thinking. And if some girl looks at you, I'm for sure your little eye will be a winking. Oh, I get confused cause I don't know where I stand, and then you smile and hold my hand. Love is kinda crazy with a spooky little boy like you. Spooky, ooh. Hey, yeah. If you decide someday to stop this little game that you are playing, I'm gonna tell you all my heart's been dying to be saying. Just like a ghost, you've been haunting my dreams, so I'll propose on Halloween. Love is kinda crazy with a spooky little boy like you. Spooky, yeah. Yeah. Da 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 da. Oh, hey. Do, oh, yeah. Spooky, if I could reach the stars, pull one down for you, shine it on my heart, so you could see the truth, that this love I have inside is everything it seems. But for now I find it's only in my dreams that could change the world. I would be the sunlight in your universe. You would think my love was really something good, baby, if I could change the world. If I could be the queen, even for a day, I'd take you as my king, having no other way. And our love, it would rule this kingdom we have made. Till then I'll be a fool, praying for the day. Oh, I could change the world. I would be the sunlight in your universe. You would think my love was really something good, baby, if I could change the world, baby, if I could change the world. My mama called, see you on TV. Some said it don't change. Ever since I was on, I dreamed it all. Ever since I was young, they said I would be nothing, but now they always say congratulations. Worked so hard, got out to vacation. They never had a dedication. People hate and say we changed. Look, we made it. Yeah, we made it. There was never friendly. Now I'm jumping out of Bentley. And I know I sound dramatic, but I knew I had to have it. Yeah, for the money I'm a savage. I be itching like an addict, and they say that I'm bad, but they didn't know me last year. Everyone wanna act like they important. Oh yeah, that don't mean nothing, and baby, you know it. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Everyone counting on me to drop the ball, yeah. Everything custom like we at the border. If you wanna win it, put your lighters to the sky. How could that make sense when I got millions on my mind? Coming with you gotta put it to the side. A ball in Santa, baby, they could see it in my eye. My mama called, see you on TV. Some said it don't change. Ever since I was young, I dreamed it all. Ever since I was young, they said I would be nothing, but now they always say congratulations. Worked so hard, but got out to vacation. They never had a dedication. People hate and say we changed, but look, we made it. Congratulations. dedication. People hate and say we changed, but look, we made it. Yeah, we made it. Oh, congratulations. Ooh, congratulations.
What Dr. Ardalan is going to share with us is a little bit of a summary and his takeaway of what was really an extraordinary education session we had just a couple weeks ago on October 17th that was organized by Dr. Andrew Heaton, our Chief Scientific Officer. And Kaveh is going to share with us tonight a presentation on what doctors are saying about new drugs for juvenile myositis. That was the topic of this particular symposium, as I mentioned, that Dr. Heaton organized, attended by over 135 medical professionals and doctors from around the world. And I think what I want to say about this is that this particular symposium, I think, advanced in a single day something that we all have been working hard at over the past couple of years in terms of identifying and beginning to see some light at the end of the tunnel in terms of the development of clinical trials that will result in new and better drugs for JM kids. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Ardalan. I first met Kaveh, gosh, I think it's been about 5 years ago when he first joined the staff at Lurie Children's Hospital, our first center of excellence, and was immediately embraced in the JM world by our Cure JM chapter and by many JM families who came from around the country. Initially to see Dr. Pachman, but ultimately to counsel with Dr. Ardalan, who in a very short period of time has become a young emerging JM expert. And so it's my pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Ardalan, now at our Center of Excellence at Duke University, to share with you some of his takeaways from new drugs for juvenile myositis. Dr. Ardalan.
Yeah, so as Jim was mentioning, I'm Kaveh Ardalan, one of the pediatric rheumatologists now at Duke University, which is a Cure JM Center of Excellence in juvenile myositis. And excuse me, I'm going to be talking about new treatments in juvenile myositis, some of what was discussed at this conference that we just had by Zoom. So just for transparency's sake, a list of any research funding. I don't have any financial conflicts of interest to disclose at this time, though. So new treatments in JM are needed. So this is a kind of slide that I often have to put in talks for sort of medical audiences, like physicians or other scientists, but I don't probably need to really go into much detail when talking to families about the need for new treatments. You guys are the ones who know and fully spearhead and give us the energy to look for better treatments. But just in brief, why do we need new and better treatments for our patients, our kids with juvenile myositis? The first is that this is often a condition that's chronic and even in some cases tough to control completely. It can come back as a flare or be tough to control in the first place. And a lot of our patients have a tough time tapering off of steroids and need combinations of existing treatments. We know that disease activity and sometimes even damage from this condition can persist into adulthood. And even our patients who get into states of remission often still are kind of deconditioned, still complain of some weakness and fatigue, despite having what appears to be no inflammation in the body. So we wonder what's going on there. How can we get at that? And then, of course, as everybody here knows, the current treatments that we have, like steroids, methotrexate, and so on, have a lot of side effects. So recognizing the need for new treatments, it's just been wonderful to partner with folks at Cure JM and really try to think about how we can advance, a community of scientists to try and really make progress on this front. And so on October 17th, this webinar was co-hosted, Cure JM Foundation, and then our team at Duke. Particularly, I want to give a lot of credit to Dr. Jeffrey DeVergston, who's my co-directing partner for our Center of Excellence. He really did a lot of the organizational work along with Andrew Heaton and Jim and everybody else at Cure JM. And together, Andrew, Jeff DeVergston, and then Dr. John O'Shea, who's at the National Institutes of Health, provided some different introductory remarks, both about the state of treatments for kids with JM, as well as some of the potential biological targets that some new medications might be able to kind of go after to decrease inflammation in the muscles and skin. And then I also provided some closing remarks about the patient's voice in all of this. So there were a lot of different treatments and new drug targets that were discussed. The ones in bold below are the ones I'll kind of focus on since our time is a little bit limited. So one medication called baricitinib, which there was a recent compassionate use trial whose findings were published by Dr. Hannah Kim at the National Institutes of Health. Vamorolone, which is being developed by a company called Reveragen, and Dr. Eric Hoffman of Reveragen presented on that. And then abatacept or abatacept, depending on how you like to pronounce it, presented by Dr. Rodolfo Curiel, also at the National Institutes of Health. But there was also some discussion of sodium thiosulfate, which is a treatment for calcinosis, and then some other novel drug targets. And if folks have questions about those, I'm happy to address those. So baricitinib, this is a type of medication called a JAK-STAT or just JAK inhibitor. And I won't go into a ton of detail about what exactly that means, but suffice to say, there are a lot of different ways that the immune system creates inflammation. And one of those pathways through which inflammation is produced is through what's called the JAK pathway, which then leads to a lot of increase in something called interferon, which is a type of family of molecules that seem to really drive a lot of the inflammation that kids with JM are experiencing. So baricitinib is thought to block this pathway, among others, and that's why it seems like an attractive option for patients with JM. So Dr. Kim at NIH presented results of this very small but interesting compassionate use trial that she was able to conduct and publish on. What they were able to accomplish is to get 4 patients who have chronically active juvenile dermatomyositis, despite having been on anywhere between 3 and 6 different immunomodulatory medications. So these are patients who have pretty tough to control JDM. And they were able to start baricitinib and continue it for a 24-week trial period. And what they found was pretty encouraging, that in all 4 of the patients, there were significant improvements in the skin rashes, strength exam, muscle inflammation as measured by MRI tests, and then also some blood markers of inflammation that you would expect should respond to a JAK inhibitor like baricitinib. So here are actually some pictures from the publication of the study findings. And as I mentioned, there are 4 patients. Each of these kind of like dual pictures are from a different patient. So you're kind of getting to see a little bit of the response across all 4 patients. And what you can see is, first of all, some of these patients did have pretty substantial rashes. And in some cases, those rashes seem to clear completely, as you can see in the patient whose eyes are shown. They have heliotrope rash on the left, and then it really cleared by the time that they were at this point of study completion. Some significant improvements in the nail fold capillaries, which are those small blood vessels that you can see in the nail bed in the upper right. Almost entirely clearance of the purplish rash of the thigh that you see in the lower right. And then although there wasn't total clearance of this quite severe chest rash, nevertheless, there was some significant improvement in that. And then without trying to like go into tons of detail, what these different charts are basically showing is different ways of measuring how active a patient's dermatomyositis is, all showed improvement. So panels A and B in the upper left and the kind of top middle, those are physician and patient ratings of how active the disease is on a 0 to 10 scale. And what you see is that the scores tend to go down over time. That's a sign of improvement. The upper right is a measure of strength called MMT8, and you want this to go up. You want higher strength, right? And you can see that in general, patients had improvements in strength. In the lower left is a measure of skin rash disease activity, and it's called the CDASI. And for all of the patients, at least some significant improvement was noted. Particularly 3 of the patients seemed to have pretty dramatic improvements. And then panel E, so the kind of lower right and lower center panel, those are showing some different blood markers of that are related to interferon, the pathway that should be decreased by baricitinib. And as you can see, there is a decrease. You will notice, like in the center panel, this little spike here for this patient who's depicted in red. That was actually a spike that was noticed because during that study visit, that patient had a viral infection, and you should actually expect a brief increase in the interferon level. That was actually thought to be reassuring because it suggests that although this is an immunosuppressive medication and you have to worry about risk of infection, nevertheless, this patient seemed to mount a good response to clear that viral infection. So overall, this is a small study, but it was really nice to see that this was a well-tolerated medication, that all 4 patients were able to tolerate it without major side effects. The key risks of this medication that will need to be considered as we go towards bigger and bigger studies would be, number 1, infection, and that's true for any immunosuppressive medication. Although it's worth noting that in these 4 patients, many of them were able to decrease their steroid doses and decrease how many other immunosuppressive medicines they're on. And so it makes you wonder if that might kind of balance somewhat the infectious risk of baricitinib. Something worth noting, if ever you have a time when your child is on baricitinib, this type of medication interestingly increases the CK muscle enzyme level. That is not a sign of worsening myositis necessarily. This is seen in patients with other diseases as well, like rheumatoid arthritis. And it's not exactly clear why that happens, but it's not usually like a huge rise. It's just a subtle increase. So this is why in this study, they also used MRI and detailed strength exams to really make sure that the muscles are healing in these patients, since the CK may not be as reliable a marker. And then with this medication, you want to monitor kidney and liver function appropriately. And then there have been some reports in other studies, not in this one, of a possible increased risk of blood clots. That seems to be mostly in adult studies. We don't yet know if that's the case for kids who are on these types of medicines. So something that we'll be looking out for. But overall, the patients in this study didn't have major issues with this treatment. So future studies are being planned both to assess the effectiveness and safety of this drug in more patients with JM, and then also to better understand what are the mechanisms by which it acts, how much is it acting on interferon versus other non-interferon pathways. So vamorolone is the next medication I wanted to talk about. It's what they are calling a novel dissociative steroid. So what does that mean? So traditional steroids, such as the well-known medication prednisone, are very potent at decreasing inflammation. And that's due to some molecular mechanisms that go by the name transrepression. This has to do with how the medication triggers certain changes in the biology of a person who's receiving them. But steroids are a double-edged sword. They decrease inflammation really effectively, and that is very helpful for kids with JM. At the same time, they have tons of side effects like weight gain, growth stunting, and on and on. And those negatively impact both quality of life and health itself. And those effects are mediated through a different set of mechanisms that are called transactivation type mechanisms. So the idea behind vamorolone is that it's essentially the molecule for this drug is structured a little differently so that what it's supposed to do is give you that potent anti-inflammatory effect that you want without triggering the mechanisms through which the side effects happen. And that seems to be what we're finding so far in some studies. This is a drug that was predominantly developed for use in Duchenne muscular dystrophy. So it hasn't been tested in JM yet, but so far in patients with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, they were able to enroll 46 boys who are young. They're between 4 and 7 years of age. It's important to note only boys get Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And they were treated over an 18-month period. They were found to have good motor outcomes, good ability to, in terms of like strength and ability to walk compared to patients who were receiving traditional steroids like prednisone. And the higher the dose of vamorolone you gave, the better the effect, which is always a good sign for a novel medication. But what was important is the improved safety profile that was seen. So they didn't see growth stunting in the kids who got vamorolone. There were lower rates of physician-reported changes in appearance that you expect with steroids. So as we all know, like if you're on steroids for even a brief while, you start to have kind of weight gain, and so rounding of the face, weight gain in the stomach area. That's called Cushing appearance, and that was not really noted very much at all in the kids on vamorolone. And then we also know that a lot of kids on steroid medicines will have major behavior changes, really intense mood swings, sadness, anger, anxiety, all very common in kids on prednisone. That wasn't really reported often in kids in this study. So the other thing that's worth noting, is that there was a prior publication before this study came out that suggested some blood markers that should correlate with bone health, risk of diabetes, and adrenal suppression, that those markers suggested that vamorolone was not causing as much trouble in those regards as well, although further study is needed to get at that. So bottom line, there are some differences between Duchenne's and JM to consider, especially in regards to the fact that the majority of JM patients are girls, and that's not true of Duchenne's. So future studies need to consider that. The total number of patients who've gotten vamorolone and been studied rigorously is still small in the absolute sense, so more studies are needed. And JM does follow a different course, and the use of steroids is somewhat different in kids with JM, who often get these big pulse IV doses of steroids at the beginning of their treatment. But nevertheless, we think it should be possible to study vamorolone in kids with JM. There are some blood markers that might be helpful for assessing its effects in kids with dermatomyositis. And currently there's some planning underway between folks at our center, myself included at Duke, folks at CureJM, and then the folks at ReveraGen. So we're trying to think about how to make this happen. And then last is abatacept in kids with refractory JM. So this is a biologic medication, and basically what it does is it inhibits the co-stimulation of T cells. So what does that mean? Basically means these immune cells called T cells, normally in kids with JM, they're kind of communicating with each other in a way that revs them up, and that increases inflammation. So abatacept is a medicine that kind of inhibits that communication between the T cells so that they calm down and don't produce so much inflammation in the muscle and skin. And there were some cases reported of severe adult and juvenile myositis patients who did well with it. So there's been interest in studying it more rigorously. There's a pediatric study going on right now, the NIH and Dr. Curel. It cannot present the data yet because the study is not complete, but they're recruiting into that study and doing the analyses. But encouragingly, there was a pilot study done in adults with dermatomyositis and polymyositis that was promising. So they had 20 patients in total who received abatacept. Excuse me, and they did note improvements in muscle strength and total improvement scores, which account for all different facets of this condition. And the safety profile was good. So those authors called for future studies with larger numbers of adult patients, and we think that this makes sense to pursue in the pediatric world as well. So it's a lot to cover, and I'm sure there's a lot more we could say about these and other treatments, but bottom line is that it's great to have support from our partners at CureJM to push these studies forward, and we are endeavoring to do so. I think it's going to be extremely important to really incorporate patient and parent perspectives into the design and reporting of these trials. And it's the biggest barrier that we face in studying new treatments is getting patients enrolled into studies. This is a rare condition. There's never going to be one hospital that has enough patients to enroll fully up to the appropriate number for a study. So this always has to be a collaboration between multiple sites. And so if you ever think that your child might benefit from a novel treatment, or you'd like to see if they qualify for studies, ask your physician to reach out to partners at CureJM who can connect your physician to the different researchers. So thank you, everybody, and I'm happy to take any questions if we have time.
So in terms of studies, on vamorolone, for example, they did a small study first before they did the 46 kids. Is that correct? I know abatacept is doing a small, they did, or baricitinib did 4 people. I mean, is that a more modulated approach to trying to do something with vamorolone with girls, since we haven't done it with girls yet?
Yeah, so so there are different phases of drug studies. Phase 1 drug studies are the earliest drug studies that are done. And those are studies where the entire goal is just to basically establish what are the appropriate doses of the medication to give and what's the safety profile of the medication. Those studies are usually pretty small. You don't need a lot of patients to establish that kind of information, at least the initial safety profile and the dosing parameters. That might be what you're referring to in terms of vamorolone. It's like more phase 1 initially. And then after that is phase 2, where you're starting to do this type of work, looking for early signs, subtle signs, of effectiveness. But usually those studies are still small. And that's on purpose. You don't want to invest a ton of resources into a medication that's not well proven. And so you start with a smaller, almost like pilot study, just to see if there's more encouraging results as you expand the number of patients who are receiving the medication. Once you've got ample evidence in phase 1 and phase 2 that this drug is really promising and that it seems reasonably safe, that's when you go to phase 3 studies, which are the really, really big studies that are really most powerfully able to establish the benefits and potential drawbacks of a new medication. And then even after that, there's what's called post-marketing surveillance, which is where even if a medication is approved for widespread use for a particular condition, there's still a lot of careful monitoring being done, nationally and internationally, to look for rare side effects that just wouldn't show up in the phase 1, 2, and 3 studies. So I hope that's helpful. I don't know if that answers your question, Suzanne.
So which phase are those 3 drugs you mentioned at right now?
Yeah, so for JM, I mean, vamorolone has not yet been given to patients with JM. So right now, the phase, if you want to use that term, is it's really under planning, right? We're trying to figure out as a community, which phase do we start with? Is there enough data from the Duchenne's patients to go straight to phase 2? Sometimes you can do a hybrid of phase 1 and phase 2 in the same study. So vamorolone is kind of in the planning phase, sort of like before phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Baricitinib, what that study was actually what's called a compassionate use trial. So that's actually a little different than the phases I laid out. Compassionate use is where you've got a medication that's been approved for other conditions, but there's reason to think it might be beneficial for patients with a different condition. But the company and the scientists who are doing the work basically design a study where the patients who can qualify to get the medication are those who really are running out of other good options. And so that's why when I mentioned like the 4 patients who were enrolled into that trial had been on multiple different immunosuppressive medicines, that's a key feature of that study, right? That they really could not do well on traditional therapy. And so that qualified them for this study. So I know that baricitinib, there is some discussion now ongoing between the team at NIH and the pharmaceutical company to see about planning a proper trial, but what exact phase it's at, I can't say just because I'm not on that committee. And then abatacept, forgive me, I think it's phase 2. I'd need to double check that to be sure, but I believe it's phase 2. I don't think it's going to be big enough to be phase 3, but I can get back to you if that's an important question for you.
Okay, thank you.
And actually, a lot of these studies, these drug trials are, you can search for them on clinicaltrials.gov, which is just a government repository of ongoing drug studies in, in the US and actually sometimes beyond. So sometimes it's interesting to check that out. You might see what's new and different in dermatomyositis or other rheumatic diseases.
It's my true honor and privilege to introduce to you the founders of Cure JM, Shari and Tom Hume. This goes back some 18 years, back to the very early years of Cure JM, when Shari and Tom really brought forth the vision for this organization on what was needed for children with JM after the diagnosis of their own son. Let me say that I think because of their leadership, we started out back then, and we're still working on it now, with basic research and funding basic research to understand the causes of juvenile myositis. Under their leadership and vision, we established a network of clinicians around the country and indeed around the world. Have created 4 centers of excellence, have focused on clinician education and training, really bringing up the next generation of JM experts, like Dr. Ardalan, for example. And I think quite importantly, under their leadership, published a book. You may all be familiar with it, called Myositis in You, which is essentially the Bible, if you will, for both caregivers and families in terms of understanding myositis and the paths for improvement for your own children. So it's now my pleasure to introduce Shari and Tom. I have a couple of questions for them to really sort of help put our work today in perspective as we go back in time, looking at the very early years of this. And my first question for them is how is Cure JM different today in its work, and particularly as that work relates to family leadership and research focus?
Well, I think I'll start with the research focus, and going back in time, I think our goal has always been to find the fastest way to reach our mission of a cure and to improve the lives of all of our kids with JM. And at the beginning, we had to find a way to use our limited resources. And we went looking for the experts in JM. And the first one we found was Dr. Lauren Pochman. And we started out with our first center of excellence there and in Chicago, where we were funding research and also supporting that center of care. And to this day, the center houses the largest JM biorepository, which is critical for conducting research and ultimately finding better treatments and a cure. And then with the help of all of you on this call today and others in the JM community, we have been able to grow substantially in size and scope. And now we have 4 centers of excellence, as Jim mentioned. So we've expanded that to Duke, where Kaveh is now, and he was at the other Cure JM Center with Dr. Lauren Pochman. So we have Duke now, we have GWU in Washington, DC, and we have Seattle Children's Hospital.
Yeah, and then we definitely started off walking before we started running, and we had a great medical advisory board that's actually grown and really does have the top researchers in the country of JM. And then we started to move into providing grants. We developed a grant program that worldwide top researchers could come and seek grants from us for research. And then what I think is the most exciting part is then we developed a grant program for fellowships. So this really is bringing the next generation of researchers to get them excited about JM as a subject or an area that they would like to research.
And I think as more dollars came into Cure JM and as we grew, we were able to start focusing more on drug development. And that's what Dr. Ardalan was talking about today. And with this drug symposium that happened 2 weeks ago, that we're in gratitude to Andrew for pulling together and the other people that worked on it. Again, Dr. Ardalan, how many times can I mention your name tonight? And other folks at Duke. So having that event was literally a dream for us as co-founders. That was something we always wanted to see happen. So having the drugs like baricitinib, abatacept, and also vamorolone. Seeing those drugs move forward is, I think, a really big step for us at Cure JM and for the JM kids. With vamorolone, seeing that move into a potential clinical trial is what we're looking at for Cure JM, and that's really exciting for us. So we're working with RevereGen and Duke on pulling that together.
You know, in another area that we really gained an understanding of a need for really from the JM community was mental health. And that through focus groups done at conferences, through surveying, this was a gap area. And now we actually do have resources on our website that are available to families to take advantage of. Equally, and this is very, very important, Cure JM is actually funding a child psych at our Center of Excellence up in Seattle. And they're working on different assessment tools for JM children, but also families too. And that psychologist is also working with Dr. Ardalan and also Brian Feldman up at Sick Children's up in Canada on a whole mental health assessment tool. And really, at this point, I just have to give a big shout out to Suzanne Edison, who has worked relentlessly to bring this whole project to fruition. And really, just it is remarkable when for us, looking back. I mean, Cure JM has funded over 175 different research studies, and that has improved the treatments and moving us all closer to hopefully our mission of a cure. And Cure JM has invested over $16 million in research or education or family support, really making it the largest funder of JM support and research in the world.
So I think we over-answered your question. That was one part of it. In terms of the family leadership part of it, I think when we first started, Parker was diagnosed 18 years ago, and I immediately went to the computer. I think that was AOL back then. And I sent out a message. Facebook did not exist at that time. And I found some message board and just tried to find anyone that had JM. And I got one response, one lonely response from a woman named Carrie Bowler. And thank goodness she lived only 15 miles away from us. So we got together and realized that we needed some type of organization for these kids. And a year after Parker's diagnosis, we did start Cure JM along with her daughter-in-law. So the four of us started Cure JM. And we started out with a small board of directors of parents with JM children, and then established a family support network, which is still in existence today, of course, growing. And then our patient registry is a big part of Cure JM, started long ago, which now is 3,000 families strong. And I think every one of those families is a huge part of our organization. All of them are leaders in our organization.
And then over time, we added advisory councils. And then right around the 10-year mark, we realized, and we had been an all-volunteer organization, and we really realized to get to that next step, we really needed a staff of professionals. And we brought in Shannon, we brought in Jim, others over time that have really just helped us accelerate our mission and everything we're trying to do. On top of that, we've established a National Leadership Council with over 150 families. Of course, now today we have 19 chapters and over 80 chapter leaders. That's 4 per chapter. And then that has spurred an outgrowth with the walk leadership for our big fundraising. So it's, for us, it's wonderful because we've seen great growth.
Yeah, and I think, credit to Jim there. Jim came in and had this idea for the regional chapters and the walk program. So that's all Jim's idea on how to get us to this next step. And so that's how we were able to get all of these new leaders in the leadership council. So, thank you to Jim for taking us to that next level. Just to wrap this section up, I was going to say we have grown substantially in both research efforts and family leadership, but just to compare to where we were 18 years ago and now, if you were to reach out on a message board such as Facebook Caregivers, which now has, I checked today, and it has almost 1,400 members. So if you send out a message today, you will get more than enough responses and help that you can really feel good about and know what to do versus that one response that I think it took a week to get an answer.
One response. Yeah.
One response. Yeah.
Well, it's been, as you mentioned, Parker was diagnosed 18 years ago, so it's been a long haul for your family as you've seen this organization grow. How have you witnessed and how have you yourself drawn strength from other families and from the JM community as you've had to deal with these challenges of living with juvenile myositis?
Yeah, I think we draw strength from both the families, the community, and then also the children and the adults that are affected by it. I think especially the children and the adults fighting the disease every day, they show this resilience and determination on a daily basis that empowers us, it's humbling to us, and then it emboldens us and ignites us with this passion and this purpose to go and fight another day and to really work on our cause. And it's just empowering for us.
I think also, you said it, I mean, we draw strength from other families, that it's that knowledge of a shared experience. It's that I can tell a story to another JM family and they'll get it. They'll understand exactly what we're going through. And it's, it's kind of sort of, it's been a very organic growth for our organization just with the families. It's almost a very wiki or a very crowd sourcing kind of thing that's just evolved. And that's what's created this momentum for us all. I think it's just so critical to, and everyone who sees it, unfortunately, this hasn't been a year for, a lot of face-to-face conferences, but even events like this just give us the chance to get together with each other and talk a little bit and share. And it's that sharing that really helps us, motivates us, and helps all the families, really.
And finally, what closing words of advice would you have, especially for families who are somewhat new to their JM journey?
Yeah, I think for us personally, or for me personally, to make sure that you focus on the entire family. I think I spent a lot of my time on the child with JM and not as much time as I should have spent on the siblings. So I think if you have other children, make sure you spend time with all of them, individual time. And I think also making sure that you take care of yourself. For me, that means running. And for others, that might be taking a walk or doing yoga or reading or whatever that might be, but just to make sure that you take care of yourself so you can take care of others. And then
yeah, and I think, words of advice, especially for new families, I would approach each doctor's visit almost as a business meeting, that you have objectives and you have goals and you have things you want to get out of that meeting. And the more organized you can be going into that with your questions, outlining what you want to understand and get through to the doctor about, the more successful we'll be, and the more, honestly, credibility you'll gain from that doctor in return, and respecting you and what they can do for you. I think that's also very important to, work with your child even before the appointment, and maybe explain, depends on the age of the child, of course, but explain kind of what the process will be, what you'll be going through with the doctor. And then lastly, infusions, they're kind of the bane of our existence a little bit, time in infusion centers. As much as you can, make those a little bit of a fun event, bringing toys, snacks, that type of thing. Of course, in a non-COVID time, maybe even bring other family members in to share that experience. I think that's good.
And then I think in terms of how you empower yourself as parents, to try to become an expert on your child's disease and learn everything you can, and to advocate for your child, because they're watching us. And as we've seen our kids turn into adults and go to the hospital on their own, now they're learning how to advocate for themselves, and they're doing the same things that they watched us do for them. So keep that in mind. And then what you guys all do is provide emotional support for other families, and that's very critical. And then also just to get involved with Cure JM, and whatever way that is again, providing emotional support or through fundraising.
Or even studies, as Dr. Ardalan.
Oh yeah, critical
Mhm.
is the research studies, very important. And Jim's going to get into the Giving Tuesday event, but that's a great way to get involved. And what we found is, I know that first ask is always hard if you're new to it, to ask someone for that donation, but it gets easier over time. And we found that friends and family, they actually do want to help, and they sometimes say, how can I help you? And for them, that's actually an easy thing to do. For some families, not everyone, but if they can't give, sometimes they can share a Facebook post, or share an email, or help in some other way. So I think
Yeah, I think you'll be surprised, especially, and again, Jim will get into more of the contest or the event coming up for fundraising, but people will come out of the woodwork that you would never expect that will donate. And even I've seen year after year, people are asking me now, when are you doing Giving Tuesday? And already very interested in helping. And people who you just were maybe just acquaintances with, but something about your story really struck a chord with them. And they know that a donation to Cure JM really is going to make a difference, because we're not a big cancer foundation. We're not, we just don't have the numbers of a lot of other foundations, but definitely we have the heart and spirit of a lot of other foundations.
And I think maybe just to wrap it up, I think something that's always motivated us are reading motivational quotes and sayings. And one of the quotes that I think always relates back to Cure JM and all of us as a group, and it's even in the Myositis and You book, is a Margaret Mead quote that says, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful and committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." And I think that speaks to all of us and what we do for Cure JM. So thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you. And I think if any of you have any questions or want to talk with Tom or Shari further, they're always available. So feel free to reach out to them directly if you have your email. If you don't, just email Shannon or me, and we'll be sure to put you in touch.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tom, Shari, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
having us.
Thank you for doing it.
Great, thanks. Well, as Shari mentioned, we've now sort of come to the concluding moments of the call as we look at kicking off the holiday challenge. The holiday challenge is really, one of our big 2 fundraising programs at Cure JM that we engage with every year. The one is Walk Strong Across America that many of you are familiar with, and then the other has been this enormously important and successful holiday challenge, which kicks off now tonight. Although some of you I know have already started your pages, your fundraising pages on CrowdRise. Some of you are already raising money. I think we've passed the $100,000 threshold toward a $650,000 goal for the year. Traditionally, Giving Tuesday, December 1st has been our big day, but I think what we are finding in this era of COVID-19, as the world has changed and people are pulled in a million different directions, that we're actually seeing a longer fundraising period that will in some ways extend a little bit beyond December 1st, Giving Tuesday, but is really happening now at the very beginning of November, being a big month and culminating on December 1st. I want to thank the Coffee family for extending a challenge to us this year. This is essentially an incentive money that that we use that is in lieu of prize money that we used to win many years ago when the sponsoring platform, if you will, CrowdRise, used to provide prizes essentially to those organizations that most effectively competed and raised the most amount of money. For many, many years, we won first place, we won second place. I think we won first place 3 years in a row in that challenge. But unfortunately, that money went away. The challenge money went away. But we're so grateful to the Coffee family for replacing that with challenge money that each of you can use to incentivize people to give to your pages. You know, we're a grassroots organization, as Tom and Shari both mentioned. We're a rare orphan disease. We will never have the size and the scope of many of the cancer organizations, for example, or the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, now known as JDRF, because even though these that's a somewhat rare disease. It doesn't fall in the category of being an orphan disease like juvenile myositis. So we really need to depend, very much on ourselves. We're not big enough to get a significant amount of attention from big pharma. We don't have a patient base where a blockbuster drug that might be developed by big pharma in collaboration with us is a realistic probability for them, and so we really need to look at the small companies like Reveragen, the creators, the developers, if you will, of vamorolone. As partners, and we need to rely on ourselves and what we can do as family members here in the United States and across the world to drive philanthropy from friends and families and individuals and small companies and communities across America that, as Tom and Shari were saying, really do step up in very significant ways when you ask. One story I'll share with you that came about last year as a result of the outreach of a very involved family with JM was we essentially acquired a $100,000 grant from a friend, if you will, who had the capacity to issue a challenge grant to help us out with Walk Strong Across America, which was essentially just based on an individual outreach from a family member who thought this individual might have the capacity to make a significant gift and in fact did. That's a rare occurrence for sure, but you would be shocked at the generosity of people that will come forward. I see these all the time of people who are writing $1,000 and $5,000 and $10,000 checks. Even though we all know most of these checks are $50 and $100 and $250, but it all adds up in a significant way, which is why we have been able to meet our very ambitious goal, not just this year of $650,000, but in past years as well. I have to believe, based on what we've just achieved this past year in this first wave of COVID-19, that we are going to have a dramatically good year in 2021. Despite all of the challenges of COVID-19, we were able to meet our budget, to make all of our grant payments, and I have no one other than you to thank for that, because it's our families who have driven the success of our fundraising in the past couple of years. And we'll continue to do that as we move forward with expanded basic research, clinical trials, as Dr. Ardalan was talking about, and what we hope to see in terms of also expanded clinical training and expansion of our support of children's hospitals, and particularly children's hospitals who are developing effective JM care programs in the future. Clinical trials actually require, more money than we've ever had to raise before. They are typically on an order of 10, 12, 15 times the expense of basic research. And the other interesting thing about clinical trials is that the deeper you go and the closer you get, unfortunately, the more it costs. So as an organization, we need to be prepared as we start down this pathway of clinical trials, of knowing that we will have the resources to be able to conclude them. Initially, this is not a number that is particularly scary. Some of these things that we were just talking about, these trials we were talking about with Dr. Ardalan, the vamorolone trial is a classic example, or one or two additional Janus kinase inhibitor trials that could be possibilities in 2022 or 2023. All initially with these small, essentially phase 1 exploratory trials would probably cost on an order, of about $1 million. And while that's a big number for CureJM, it's not a number that is out of reach. And that's a big part of our strategy moving forward. Is we're not looking to find those drugs that would necessarily be approved for use in juvenile myositis. What we want is we want to have those drugs where we have clinical evidence that they work in juvenile myositis. They can be approved, as all our drugs are today, for other indications and used in juvenile myositis and reimbursed by insurance companies with the right kind of academic clinical trial protocols. So a 10 or 15 or $25 million trial to actually have a drug approved in juvenile myositis is not something that CureJM would be able to afford. Having that kind of clinical trial that proves effectiveness in juvenile myositis and allows clinicians to move forward with the use of that compound, whether it's a vamorolone or a baricitinib or an abatacept, being the three leading candidates, is our goal here. While that will cost millions more than we've had to raise in the past, it's very, very doable, and we're very optimistic, as you heard from Dr. Ardalan, about the outcomes. So I want to thank all of you who have already started your teams and are helping us as we're up and running. As I mentioned, well past the $100,000 threshold here, with a month to go before our big day, Giving Tuesday. If you need any help in establishing your page and creating a team, in drafting letters for outreach, we have all of that there for you to help. Just reach out and ask Shannon or ask Simonetta or ask Lauren. I think you all know them or know certainly have their emails, and they would be more than happy to assist you and provide resources that you might find helpful. If you have yet to sign up, you can do that at www.curejm.org/Giving Tuesday, or simply pick up the phone or send an email to Shannon or Lauren or Simonetta or me, and we'll be as helpful as we can. Let me stop here and ask if any of you have any questions, and again express my deep thanks for your incredible leadership, at the chapter level, if you have a chapter, but certainly in the Giving Tuesday, it has become the significant fundraiser for Cure JM, and I have every confidence that we'll succeed this year beyond our wildest imagination. So thank you all for all you do for Cure JM.